Sandra Johnsen-Hughes vanished in September 2020 near the Chiquito Pass trailhead, deep within the Sierra National Forest, just a few miles from the edge of Yosemite National Park. She had set out alone for a camping trip, prepared, meticulous, independent. But the wilderness can be cruel, unforgiving. One wrong step, one twist of fate, and everything can vanish. That weekend, it seemed to remind everyone of that fact. Sandra's car had an accident near the trailhead. Metal groaned, tires spun. She refused help when it came, insisting she could manage herself. Friends and neighbors tried, park rangers tried, even other hikers offered assistance. She waved them off, determined, stubborn, independent. Days later, searchers found her campsite abandoned, and nearby, a brand new sleeping bag 2.5 miles inside Yosemite's boundary, sitting quietly among the trees. But Sandra herself, nowhere to be found. Search teams moved quickly. Helicopters circled above the ridges, scanning the dense pines and granite cliffs. Volunteers tramped through tangled brush, calling her name, their voices swallowed by the forest. Dogs strained at leashes, noses to the ground, tracing scents that disappeared abruptly. Every footprint led only to more questions. The forest seemed alive, almost mocking the searchers, hiding tracks, obscuring trails. And the sleeping bag? So small, so out of place, sat silently, as though daring anyone to unravel its story. Here is the tricky part. No one knew how that sleeping bag ended up there. Could Sandra have dragged it herself, through miles of steep, rocky terrain, streams, and dense undergrowth? Could she have survived on her own, moving slowly, avoiding rescuers, hiding perhaps because she did not trust help? Or had the forest somehow guided her or trapped her? It didn't make sense. She was careful, experienced. Every instinct suggested she would stay closer to the trailhead, where she could be found. Yet somehow, the wilderness swallowed her possessions, and her completely. Friends and family were caught between hope and dread. The car remained at the scene, hazard lights blinking in lonely rhythm. Personal items lay scattered inside, but nothing definitive. Nothing that explained why Sandra, so careful, so independent, would vanish into dense forest alone. They remembered her stubborn streak, her humor, her ability to endure long hikes, cold nights, and unpredictable weather. But the forest has its own rules, and sometimes it does not bend for anyone. The first days of the search were tense, almost surreal. Every ridge was climbed, every canyon inspected. Helicopters swept valleys. Volunteers called, shouted, whispered her name into the wind, but the forest swallowed it all. Tracks disappeared. Footprints ended mid-trail. A broken branch here, a slight disturbance in moss there. Each tiny clue raised pulses, then disappeared into nothing. And through it all, that sleeping bag waited. A silent riddle 2.5 miles inside Yosemite. Here is the tricky part. The deeper searchers went, the more the forest seemed to play tricks on their senses. Fog rolled in suddenly, obscuring cliffs. Shadows moved where there should be nothing. Some claimed to hear faint calls, whispers in the wind. Skeptics blamed imagination, exhaustion, fear. But those who had been there felt it. The forest was alive, watching, patient. And every step deeper into the woods felt like stepping further into a story that had no ending yet. Volunteers began imagining her nights alone, fog creeping over ridges, the temperature dropping, shadows flitting between trees. She had a brand new sleeping bag, maybe a small comfort against the chill. Perhaps she thought she could survive on her own. Perhaps she believed she could stay ahead of help and yet avoid danger. But the forest is patient. It waits. It tests. And sometimes, even the strongest, most prepared wanderers are humbled. As the week stretched on, the tension shifted from hope to dread. Local hikers whispered about strange sounds at night rustling where no animal should be. Distant cries carried on the wind. Some dismissed these as imagination. Others swore they had glimpsed movement in the trees. And yet, every day, volunteers returned to the same question. Could Sandra still be alive, surviving the wilderness by wit and will? Or had the forest claimed her silently, leaving only the sleeping bag as a marker of her passage? Here is the tricky part. Searchers had no way to know which path she took, if any. The Sierra National Forest is vast, rugged, full of hidden ravines, sudden streams, steep ridges. Trails twist like puzzles on old maps. For every path cleared, another seemed to disappear. And the sleeping bag, perfectly new, perfectly intact, was like a flag planted deep in Yosemite, taunting those who wanted answers. Was it a sign of survival? Or simply the last trace before she was gone forever? Days became weeks. Search teams dwindled. Helicopters flew fewer sorties. Hikers and volunteers left small notes along trails, markers of hope, or perhaps offerings to a legend in the making. Sandra's friends posted online, recalling her laugh, her independence, her love of the outdoors. Each post was a reminder. Someone loved her, someone remembered her, and somewhere, someone hoped she might still be out there. The forest, patient and vast, gave no answer. Here is the tricky part. Every discovery, every clue, seemed to circle back to the same question. Was she lost, hiding, surviving, or gone? Broken branches, faint footprints, the sleeping bag. All hinted at a story, but never revealed it. And the Sierra National Forest, in its quiet dominance, refused to surrender its secrets. Every hiker, every searcher, felt the same uneasy sensation. The forest was patient, indifferent, alive. And somewhere within it, Sandra Johnsen-Hughes' story lingered, unfinished, unresolved. Months passed. Official reports documented her campsite, the abandoned car, the sleeping bag, and the absence of any definitive trace of Sandra herself. The case remained open, unsolved. And yet, for those who had been near Chiquito Pass, the story became legend. The forest seemed to hold her presence in the rustling leaves, the sighing pines, the morning fog drifting over ridges. Visitors left small notes in trees, hoping she might see them, hoping she might still be alive. Here's the tricky part. Every new hiker, every passing volunteer wondered the same thing. Could she be surviving somewhere, beyond reach? Or had the wilderness claimed her, leaving only traces, hints, and a single sleeping bag as a quiet testament? And when night falls over the Sierra National Forest, when the wind whispers between the branches, the question echoes, unanswered. Will Sandra Johnsen-Hughes be found? Or will the forest keep her forever? The story lingers unfinished. The mystery endures, unbroken. And somewhere, deep inside Yosemite's border, the wilderness waits, patient, eternal, holding on to its secret, holding on to Sandra. Dennis Martin, just 6 years old, disappeared on June 14, 1969, near the Strawberry Panorama Trail in the Great Smoky Mountains. That morning had begun like any other family outing. Blankets spread across the grass, picnic baskets brimming with sandwiches and pies, cousins running in every direction. Laughter carried over the hills, mixing with the songs of birds and the murmur of distant streams. But the forest has a patience and a silence that can swallow even the most ordinary moments. In one heartbeat, Dennis was there alive, running, laughing, and in the next, he was gone. His parents looked up from setting the picnic and realized he was missing. At first, they thought he had wandered toward another group of children, following a trail too small for adult eyes. But as the minutes passed, panic began to creep into their hearts. Huddled together, they called his name over the rolling hills, voices quivering, echoing off the thick canopy of the Smoky Mountains. Other families nearby joined the search, scanning the woods, scanning the rocks, scanning every curve in the trail. And yet, the boy did not appear. Rangers arrived, bringing their own search teams. Volunteers formed lines through dense undergrowth, moving carefully through tangles of ferns and brambles. Dogs strained against their leashes, noses to the ground, sniffing faint scents that seemed to vanish almost immediately. Helicopters hovered overhead, their rotors chopping the summer air, calling out Dennis's name again and again. Every ridge, every hollow, every stream was combed meticulously. Broken twigs, flattened grass, a small shoe. Signs appeared, then disappeared, leaving more questions than answers. The mountains themselves seemed to shift. The sunlight through the trees created shadows that played tricks on the eyes, and the narrow trails wound in confusing spirals that made it almost impossible to see more than a few steps ahead. No adult could imagine how a child might navigate these steep inclines alone, or if he had even managed to move from the site at all. Some wondered if he had been lured by curiosity, following a butterfly or a rabbit, unaware of how quickly the forest could hide him. Others feared something darker, something that could not be explained by chance or misstep. Days stretched into weeks. Teams rotated tirelessly. Volunteers slept under tarps or in cars, returning at dawn to retrace trails, scan ridges, and call out across the valleys. Every new sign, an impression in the dirt, a broken branch, a disturbed rock, was examined, documented, and ultimately led nowhere. The boy's small footprints seemed to disappear, as if the forest itself had erased them. And the more the searchers explored, the more it felt like the mountains were refusing to give him up, holding their secret tightly in the thick pines and underbrush. Dennis's family became shadows among the searchers. They walked mile after mile, peered into hollows and crevices, called his name until their voices cracked. Nights were worse. The Smoky Mountains are alive with sounds that can unsettle even the bravest hard owl's hooting. Leaves rustling under unseen feet, wind whispering through the ridges. Every sound raised hope, then crushed it, leaving only the echo of what might have been. Children from nearby families remembered the boy. Some claimed they saw him running toward a bend in the trail. Others swore he had vanished in a blink, a blur among the trees. The accounts were inconsistent, unreliable, but each recollection carried the same weight. Dennis had disappeared with almost impossible suddenness. It was not just that he was lost. It was that the forest had folded him into itself, leaving only the memory of a boy who had existed for a brief, shining moment in that mountain clearing. As the weeks became months, the searches slowed. Helicopters flew less often. Volunteers returned home, exhausted and defeated. The trails returned to their natural silence, leaves settling again over every footprint, every disturbance. And yet, in the minds of those who had been there, Dennis remained alive, not in a literal sense, but as a presence in the mountains. Every rustle, every flicker of movement between the trees was a reminder that something or someone remained unseen, lingering beyond reach. Even decades later, hikers on the Strawberry Panorama Trail speak in hushed tones about the boy who vanished. Parents warn their children to stay close. Volunteers leave small markers, little reminders of vigilance, almost as if acknowledging that the forest is full of spaces humans cannot control or fully understand. Shadows lengthen differently there. Streams murmur with an undertone of memory. Rocks and roots hide gaps where a child could slip and vanish, leaving nothing behind. What makes this disappearance so haunting is not only that Dennis was never found, but that no clues can explain his fate. He was not alone when he vanished. He was in the midst of family and friends. No one saw an abduction. No one saw him fall. No one saw him enter some hidden crevice or ravine. And yet, the Great Smoky Mountains, their dense forest, tangled trails, sudden drops, and hidden hollows took him completely. The mountains remain patient, vast, unyielding. They wait and they remember. Sometimes, hikers report glimpses of a small figure running ahead along the trail, just at the edge of perception, vanishing when approached. Some hear a child's laugh carried on the wind, so faint it could almost be imagined. Others see tracks too small to belong to any adult. Whether these are signs of Dennis himself, or memories of a long-lost presence imprinted on the forest, no one can say. And every witness returns to the same question. Is he somewhere in the woods, surviving unseen? Or has the forest claimed him forever? Dennis Martin's story lingers in the Smoky Mountains like a shadow cast long across the trees. Each trail, each ridge, each hollow holds a fragment of the mystery. Families hike there, keeping children close, whispering the tale of a boy who vanished in a single moment. Rangers occasionally return to check trails, remembering the searchers who combed every inch without success. Volunteers speak of the forest's patience, its quiet power, and the unsettling way it can hide even the smallest life completely. The mountains continue to change. Fog drifts in suddenly. Shadows stretch across the trail. Streams swell and shrink with the seasons. And yet, among these changes, the memory of Dennis Martin remains. He vanished in 1969, yet he exists in stories, in whispers, in the careful eyes of those who venture into the Strawberry Panorama Trail. The forest keeps its secrets well. It hides them beneath leaves, rocks, and roots. And somewhere beyond human reach, the question endures. Could Dennis still be out there, surviving in silence? Or has the great Smoky Mountains held him in its embrace forever? Even today, the story is told as a cautionary tale, as a haunting memory, and as a reminder of how easily the wilderness can overwhelm. The trail twists and turns. The forest sighs under the wind. And for those who remember, and for those who dare to venture there, Dennis Martin is never fully gone. Not entirely. Not yet. On Friday, June 11, 2011, George Penca, a 30-year-old hiker from Hawthorne, California, went for what should have been a routine hike with his church group at the Upper Yosemite Falls Trail. The trail is famous, steep and breathtaking, rising almost 2,500 feet above Yosemite Valley. That morning, 80 members of his church set out, some heading to the lookout point at the top, others remaining near the base. George was part of the group ascending the trail. He had health challenges, minor issues that limited his stamina, but he was in good spirits. He smiled, joked, and kept up with the group. But at some point, he fell slightly behind. And then he was gone, completely gone. Those who last saw him described nothing unusual, no sudden fall, no sign of distress, just gone. The trail itself is beautiful but treacherous. Oak forests cloak the lower sections, giving way to sheer granite cliffs and narrow ledges. To one side, the valley drops away hundreds of feet. To the other, a granite wall rises sharply, smooth and unforgiving. For most hikers, it is awe-inspiring. For George, it would become the setting for an unsolved mystery. As the day wore on, the group reached the top, took in the views of Half Dome and the valley below, and began descending. George, as the last in line, lagged behind. And when the group returned to the valley floor, the realization struck them like lightning. George wasn't there. Park officials were notified immediately. Search operations began that very night. It became one of the largest in Yosemite's history. Around 150 search and rescue personnel scoured 70 square miles of rugged terrain, aided by helicopters, canine units, and teams from 14 California counties. Every boulder was checked, every cliffside surveyed, every possible hiding spot combed for evidence. But despite the resources, despite the manpower, despite the thoroughness, there was nothing. No footprints, no clothing, No bag. Not even a trace of George. It was as if he had evaporated into the valley air. Volunteers continued searching for weeks, but each day added more frustration and despair. The trail where he vanished was sunny, mild, and clear. The weather offered no excuse. So how could it have happened? One theory suggests he may have fallen off the side of the trail. Yet climbers meticulously examined the cliffs below and found nothing. Could he have ventured upward, scaling rocks to areas even more rugged? It seems unlikely given his physical condition and the steepness of the terrain. Another possibility is that in the confusion of group hiking, his presence was assumed, that he wandered off briefly and then got lost. But for someone with his size, build, and prior hiking experience, vanishing without leaving a trace defies reason. Did some unforeseen danger intervene? Was there a predator? Or an accident hidden from view? None of these possibilities fully satisfy the mystery. Back on the trail, the hikers who saw him last replayed the day in their minds. George had been smiling, laughing, moving with care. He carried only a small cloth bag, minimal food and water, and wore gray sweatpants, a black t-shirt, and running shoes. He had dark brown hair, blue eyes, and a stocky frame. Nothing about him suggested vulnerability. Yet, for reasons no one can explain, he disappeared. Volunteers recall the tension of searching the granite walls, the echo of their voices bouncing off sheer cliffs, the hopelessness of calling out his name with no answer. Each boulder overturned, and each bush searched added only more questions. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The church members grieved, revisited memories of laughter and camaraderie, but never the moment of disappearance. Authorities kept the search open for some time, though gradually the focus shifted to a continuous limited search. Still, the trail holds its secret. Experts suggest the terrain can hide even large objects or people from view. But in a case where hundreds of man-hours were invested, with helicopters and dogs, the lack of evidence is confounding. People wonder, could he have slipped into a hidden crevice? Or is it possible he wandered far beyond the lookout without anyone noticing? The questions gnawed at everyone involved. Friends and family of George Penca describe him as kind, thoughtful, and dependable. He had a quiet strength that made him a natural leader in his church group. Yet even with these qualities, the forces of nature or something else entirely were far beyond his control that day. Locals who know the Upper Yosemite Falls Trail describe pockets of dense brush, hidden granite crags, and ledges obscured by trees that make it possible to vanish from view. But still, George left no trace. No scratches, no dropped items, no witness accounts. Only the haunting knowledge that something about that day is unsolvable. To this day, people hike that trail and imagine George ascending, smiling, unaware of the fate awaiting him. Tourists pause at the lookout, envisioning the valley below, the sheer drops, the granite walls, the hidden crevices. And they wonder, could someone really disappear like that here? Local rangers recount the story with reverence and caution, reminding hikers to stay vigilant, stick to the path, and never underestimate the wilderness. George's disappearance has become a touchstone case, cited in discussions of mysterious vanishings in national parks. It challenges logic, patience, and even hope itself. And yet, despite all of this, a strange hope persists. Perhaps George simply found a hidden refuge, beyond human sight, in a canyon or pocket of the Yosemite terrain where he remains unknown. Perhaps someday, decades later, evidence will resurface, a misplaced item, a photo, a note, and finally provide answers. Or perhaps the valley simply keeps its secrets, as it has for countless others. One thing is certain, the story of George Penca is far from ordinary. It lingers in the minds of hikers, search teams, and those who hear it, because it defies explanation, and because, sometimes, the wilderness simply refuses to give up its mysteries. So we are left with the question that has haunted everyone who followed his disappearance. What really happened to George Penca? Did he fall? Did he wander? Or did the valley simply swallow him whole, leaving only echoes of a man who should have returned home? Perhaps one day the answer will be revealed. Until then, we remember him and the baffling, unsolved mystery of his final hike at Upper Yosemite Falls. Some mysteries are hidden in the wild, and many are never solved. Subscribe and witness the next true disappearance every other day.